McGraw Millhaven here, Kelly Jackson. Yesterday and today was the first day you can file bills in Jefferson City. Our next guest, the first bill he filed, one of the first in the session, is he wants the city of St. Louis and the Kansas City to do away with their earnings tax. State Senator Kurt Schaefer, a Republican from Columbia. Thank you for joining us here on KTRS Radio.
Thanks for having me on, McGraw. How you doing this morning?
You're in Columbia. Why should you and the state legislature determine how the city of St. Louis taxes itself?
Because it's the job of the state legislature to make sure that Missouri's economy is viable and moving forward. And what we have seen in the last few years is absolute stagnation, job loss, capital investment loss, not only to other countries, but to surrounding states that have a better tax environment. I'm the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which means that on the Senate side of the building, I'm the one that has to every year make a $26 billion budget workout. And, in the past, when we've seen Missouri's economy dip, I've had to cut over $1 billion out of the budget. But what we don't see out of some of these municipalities, and this is what comes up on the earnings tax, is, they don't make the hard choices. They don't look at long-term investment. They simply want to tax people more money. I think people who live in St. Louis and Kansas City have just as much of a right to keep more of their money as everyone else in the state.
In 2011, this was put on the ballot, and the city voted overwhelmingly 9-1 to continue taxing themselves that 1%. So the people of St. Louis City have spoken. They like the earnings tax.
Well, I think you have to look at it regionally as opposed to statewide. And on a statewide level, what we're seeing is the economy in St. Louis is frankly not doing as well as other parts of the state, and the state of Missouri is not doing as well as other states around Missouri. So the issue has to be addressed overall in long-term investment. I think the other issue that's different after that is, you've now got St. Louis still trying to push forward on an increase in their minimum wage, which will absolutely devastate St. Louis's economy. So if you add a local income tax, call it the earnings tax, call it whatever you want, it's basically just another level of income tax on people in St. Louis that people in the rest of the state, other than Kansas City, don't pay. And then on top of that, you add an increase in the minimum wage. What you're going to see is an absolute drain of capital and job opportunities out of St. Louis. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
How do you propose the city of St. Louis make up, which I've heard is over $100 million in lost revenue if this earnings tax goes away?
Well, they're going to have to address it anyway, because this past May, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that there are aspects of that earnings tax that are unconstitutional. The city of Maryland had the exact same structure, and it was struck down as unconstitutional as a violation of the Commerce Clause in May. So the city's going to have to deal with this either way. So either they're going to deal with it with the Missouri legislature, and we can negotiate some way that is best for all parties, or someone's going to file suit. It's going to go to court. The court is simply going to do what the U.S. Supreme Court's already done, which is strike it down, and then it's just going to stop cold turkey. So they're going to deal with it one way or another. This isn't an option that it's just going to keep going.
Kurt Schaefer with us for a couple of more minutes. Quickly, Kurt Schaefer, have you talked to the others in your party down in Jefferson City? Do you think you have the votes and the supports to get this passed and then ultimately override a veto by a Democratic governor if he does it?
I think that the majority of the Missouri Senate, which would be my caucus members, are anti-tax, job-killing taxes. They want to see growth in the state of Missouri, and I think this is a huge part of it.
What about Mayor Slay? Have you talked to Mayor Slay about this? You mentioned the earnings tax and the rift between the state and the city over the earnings tax fight. Have you had a chance to talk to Mayor Slay about what you're doing?
Not specifically about this legislation. I've talked to him in the past about a whole lot of things. But I think on this issue, again, the U.S. Supreme Court has already struck down the same scheme in Maryland earlier this year. The city's going to have to deal with it. It's either going to be a negotiation with the legislature and finding a way that everybody can move forward, or they're going to get hit with a lawsuit. They're going to lose, just as Baltimore did. And they're going to lose it cold turkey. So they're going to address it one way or another.
Why not put a cap on it? Say, anyone under making $75,000 or some type of income limit, so that people making over that would have to pay the earnings tax, but have some type of income requirement.
Well, first of all, that doesn't address the double taxation issue that the U.S. Supreme Court found unconstitutional. But the other issue is, and you raise a really good point, First of all, everyone in Missouri, whether you're making $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year, should be able to keep that 1% in their pocket and spend it how they want instead of giving it to City Hall. And on top of that, there are exemptions that the city gives out, mostly to large corporations and to entities that, frankly, probably have the ability to pay it better than a lot of those that do have to pay it, people who aren't making as much money. So you've got a lot of arbitrary decisions in who pays it, who doesn't already. This thing's been on the books since the 1940s. It's antiquated. It's dysfunctional. It's now unconstitutional as declared by the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's going to have to be revisited.
Kurt Schaefer with us. A lot of people have talked about the earnings tax. A lot of people have, a lot of hot air about this. I'm going to ask you again, percentage-wise, how much percentage-wise do you think you have a chance to get this past your caucus in the Senate and the House and ultimately turned into a law? What percentage would you put on this?
I'd say a very, very high probability. And again, it's going to have to be dealt with. And so if the city of St. Louis wants to try and kill this in the legislature, which I don't, if that's their prerogative or not to do that, but if they do, they're going to have to address this issue in a court case.
State Senator.
Because just as the city of Baltimore lost, the city of St. Louis will lose. But I believe absolutely it will get passed in the legislature. I think that there is a strong will in the Missouri legislature to make sure that we are doing everything possible to grow Missouri's economy and move it forward. This is a job-killing tax, double taxation by the city of St. Louis, and it's one of those things that's going to have to be addressed one way or another, and I think absolutely it will get passed.
State Senator Kurt Schaefer, Republican from Columbia, making news, introducing a bill that would do away with the city's earnings tax in Kansas City and in St. Louis. State Senator Kurt Schaefer, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, McGraw. Good to talk to you.
You got 7-Eleven, Big 550, KTRS. Well, that will be a topic of conversation throughout the city of St. Louis as we go forward. Menino's Market.